So how many of you have left office early today to attend this seminar without any disturbance? Type us in the chat box. Let me see whether you are able to hear me and see me clearly. Can I have from participants, can you all access the chat box? So you could have been anywhere doing anything, but you have chosen to attend this webinar organized by TIE. I thank you from my bottom of my heart for being here, and I'm going to do my best to make it worth your time. Thank you, Priya, Saurav, and Kapil for organizing this and introducing us to this event. And I'm really excited to be here, especially today. You know why? I'm going to interact with 100 business owners. And the other reason is that I'm entering into the 7th year of my entrepreneurial journey today. And it's a great journey, a fortune to me to be in the midst of two stalwarts in the respective area on one side and business owners who are very curious and to learn and grow significantly. During last session on pain and possibilities, Mr. Vairamani Pandyan and B. Nandakumar discussed various cases from their experiences on how to develop right strategies and setting up the right business model. How many of you enjoyed that last session? Type S in the chat box. Awesome. Today we are going to make it more interesting. Ask me how. Any session, they say, will be interesting and lively only if the participants participate by responding to a speaker's question or the participant raising a lot of queries, questions related to the topic for that day. So it's our joint responsibility to keep today's session more interesting and lively. How many of you want to know how to have a sustainable business growth? How many of you want to know how operations add value to your customers? How many of you want to know that how the systems and processes in finance and operations create value to your organization? And I'm sure that you will have a lot of insights by end of this session. Now let me take the privilege of introducing the speakers. In fact, Saurav was briefly introduced to them. I'm going to spend a little more time on that in discussing details. Nandu, as everyone calls him, brings about 4 decades of business experience, starting off with sales and marketing. He has seen his career led up to corporate level assignments as president and CEO. His central work has been business development, brand management, and sales, with an oversight of allied functions such as operations, research, exports, finance, and HR. Nandu has worked with a varied set of industries including tobacco, personal care, food, dairy, home appliances, telecom, and healthcare. He has traveled the length and breadth of Indian markets and has been on some international assignments as well. The companies he has worked in includes VST, ITC, Kavincare, Hudson, among others. Nandu enjoys traveling and music. He also loves experiencing food from near and far. Welcome, sir, to this webinar.
Pleasure. Thank you, Ibrahim.
And he is also known as Google Map in a human form. He knows all the streets. Okay. Now let me take the privilege of introducing Mr. Subir Majumdar. Subir is a senior industry leader with close to 4 decades of experience. He is a versatile supply chain professional with strategic thinking and a realistic focus. His experience spans industries such as tobacco, personal care, tires, tea, merchandising items, and IT services. A graduate of IIT Kharagpur, most of his career was in companies such as ITC, Kavincare, and Tata Consultancy Services. He has worked in many regions of India and has international exposure as well. With his corporate level experience and of general management and supply chain specialization, Subir brings a neat blend of technology, commerce, and human perspective to managerial challenges. In his younger days, he had keen interest in squash and billiards. What has continued is his love for chess, music, and painting. Welcome, sir, to this TIE webinar.
Thanks. Thanks, Vaishnav.
First, let me invite Mr. B. Nandakumar to share his thoughts.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Happy to see all of you, and glad to move into the second of the series, of the four-part series on pains and opportunities in business. Topic today, when I went through the headline, I remember attending a management development program, in-house management development program of one of the companies I was working with. And the session was led by the finance director. And the first words in the session, I can never forget. What he said was, profit is a concept. Profit is a concept. Cash is reality. He said, you may be an extremely profitable company, but you won't have money to pay salaries. Watch out for that. And how true. Okay, we have seen many companies go down the drain just because of cash problems. Some years later, I don't know whether it was some advertising group meeting or something, I met the head of a multinational, managing director of a multinational company. And we were chatting and he came up to me and said, the business is simple. You have to buy something, you may process it. You have to sell it at a higher price than what you bought and processed. And you have to collect before you have to pay. He said business principles are simple. Okay, if we adhere to them, we can run our businesses well. So he brought about two aspects, a little more than what the finance director brought up. He emphasized on unit profitability. If you sell something, if you sell a unit of something, you have to make profit on it. Otherwise, it's not business. It's not good business. And he also said that you must never, be at a loss to pay, because you should have collected before you have to pay. You should have collected your dues before you have to pay. And that brings me to an old saying. It's a rule of thumb of bankers, they say. The rule of thumb of bankers says, assume you will have to pay your bills 60 days before they are due. And assume that your outstandings will come only 60 days after they are due. Okay? That will make you a careful and cautious businessman. Okay, that'll set the rules right for you. Okay, that'll ensure that. Now, the most important thing here is that emphasis on cash. And there are a host of companies which have gone down, okay, because of mismanagement of finances, being in a cash crunch. To name a few, last time I mentioned Atlas Cycles. Okay, you can add to that Reed and Taylor. We know what happened to Kingfisher. Okay. Harley Davidson in India. Okay, but that was largely a demand-led issue, but it led to a cash crunch. Okay, there are a whole host of examples if you want to look at that. So the point that's being made here is profit is important, but cash is no less. Okay, and therefore planning your cash is very important, and having a slightly conservative cash forecast, okay, may actually put you in a better position. So if you have a little extra cash, you have less to worry. I know of a company who had gone to great pains to manage their cash. They had about 20 branches across the country. And the system is they have to collect money in advance before stocks are sent. Now, it was a well-run, well-planned company. Therefore, the previous month, the shipments planned for the next month would be shared with the primary customers or distributors. And a remittance plan would be given to them, saying that on these days, you have to remit to the collection bank so much money. This would be shared with the collection bank. Now, on those days, the collection bank would transfer to the head office account of the company the indicated amount. The customers would have remitted the money. Anyone who did not remit the money would be charged a penal rate of interest, and he would have to pay it by demand draft the next day. If there was, but the bank would always transfer the agreed amount. If there was excess cash, that would be those days telegraphically transferred the next day. Okay. So that was the extent to which they went to plan their cash, so that they were not under in terms of cash, and they did not waste cash if it was excess. So much for cash. Being from the business development side, I thought I'll talk a little about pricing. What I've seen commonly being followed for pricing, and it's something which many companies follow, is that they take the total cost, the raw material, the packing material cost, they add the manufacturing cost, and then they add a margin to it. So cost of goods sold, they add a margin to it, and then they sell it. Now, this is a manufacturer method of pricing. A marketeer method of pricing would be to see what is the value that is being delivered to the consumer. Okay, to check what price the consumer is willing to pay. If there is some disturbance, someone is not muted.
Maybe, hello?
Okay, thank you. So, how much is the customer willing to pay? Pricing according to that, and actually constructing your product according to that, and pricing according to that would be a better way of pricing. Now, that would ensure that, one, the demand aspect is looked after. It would also ensure, two, that your margin aspirations are also looked after. So it's a win-win from both a consumer and the marketeer side. These days, there's a lot of technology in pricing. I'm sure we have all heard of Uber surge pricing. We've all heard of airlines pricing. We've all heard of various marketplaces pricing. Now, these are done by algorithms, so it's machine decided pricing, it's algorithm decided pricing. But a word of caution. If you practice something like this on the pricing front, because there's a lot of technology coming into vogue these days. There's a small story which I read. In fact, that article will be useful. It's called The Pitfalls of Pricing Algorithms. It's in the latest September-October 2021 HBR. Please read it if you can. It says that on the 3rd of June, there was a terrorist attack. There was a shooting on London Bridge. And there were many people around there who wanted to flee that place. And all of them called for Uber cabs. The pricing surged as much as 300, 400% or something. Now, and many people did not get cabs. So here is a message. Not only is there an maximizing revenue aspect, but there's also a message which you're sending to consumer. In an extremely dire situation, when the customer needs something, needs your service badly, you tend to exploit it through very high pricing. So you're sending a message to the consumer. So you have to be aware of it. So if you are doing algorithm pricing, you'll have to be careful. There must be a manual override. Someone has to oversee it. Okay, in cases of such emergency. Apparently, the same thing happened in when there was a taxi strike in New York in 2017. So it's a common occurrence, and it sends bad signals to consumers. So that's a point that was being made. The third aspect I want to talk about is managing partner margins, partner remuneration, partner margins, channel partner, business partner margins. There have been very simple methods which people have used, saying, hey, what is the industry now? What is the competitor doing? Okay. But remember, in a value chain, each member of that value chain must get a reward equal to the value added by that member of the channel. So, if you fix a margin based on competitor margins, the competitor may have higher inventory requirements than you. So, you may actually be spending more. So, the cost to you may be more. The competitor may be selling more expensive, higher margin products than yours. Okay, so that would also push up your cost. Therefore, if you do margins, you're committing for life because that's a percentage. So maybe you should work out what the value you expect out of that channel partner is. Assign that value, cost that value. Okay, and to support the smallness of the business till they grow, till they break even, maybe you could do subsidies or other support measures. This is a very important point, I thought. Otherwise, you'll end up either overcompensating them or maybe even undercompensating them. Both are not conducive to the business. Finally, about funding, there's really nothing much I can talk to a group of entrepreneurs about funding, really. I'm sure all of you know that it's important. The timing is important. How much money you need is important. Okay, getting it at the right nature is important. There are many sources for funds. Okay, the simplest being your own family, your own friends, banks, venture capitalists, private equity is for very large companies, angel investors, a whole host of them. Now, who do you go to? But I thought two things are important when we talk about. The first one is that banks, contrary to popular belief, banks are still your cheapest source of finance because their term loans, okay, will still be lower than what venture capitalists expect from you, 5-10x growth, okay, over a 5-year period. Because otherwise it would have been wealth It would have been your wealth. It would have been your company's wealth. Okay, it's a payout. You may not realize it, okay, but it's still a payout. So banks, they are still, but there are difficulties in getting bank funding. Okay, in terms of documents, in terms of collateral, in terms of various other things. For tiny, small and medium sector, up to 1 crore funding is available from various government organizations, SIDBI, small and medium industries, capital funding, a whole host of people like that. The second aspect of funding which I wanted to talk about was that don't sell your company away cheaply while looking for funds. Don't draw in, don't give away equity when your company value is still very low. It's better to go for debt at that time and convert the debt to equity later, rather than to go for equity. Now, these are some of the thoughts I wanted to share. And it would be enriching if we can engage in a discussion on this later. My friend Subir will now take you through operations and his learnings out of that.
Okay, let me first say that operations management, okay, is not all that flamboyant. So you may find it a little dull, but it is a requisite part of any process, be it in manufacturing or in service. It's like any other function that an organization has. Now, what is this operations management? It's all about a transformation, a process which converts certain input, which could be materials, which could be labor, to an output, which could be some goods or it could be some services. And what is the objective? The objective is to do this efficiently. And when I say efficiently, it means need to keep the costs low and maximize the profit. And also it needs to do it effectively, which is to keep the customers satisfied. Now, this effectiveness is also in certain way a kind of responsiveness to the customer's demand. And therefore, at times, the efficiency and the responsiveness, there may be a trade-off. You'll have to decide where you want to stay. And it could change during various stages of your growth. Now, before you get into operations, in any organization, you have to have a strategy. You have to have a planning process. Only after that, you get into operations. What does this operations constitute? It constitutes a forecast. Then once you have forecasted what you want to manufacture, what you want to provide as a service, you then have to do certain procurement or sourcing. And then you, depending upon again the kind of business that you are in, some of the businesses you may have to have it in the warehouse, which involves inventory. After all this, you get into the operations part of it, which you have to do efficiently and effectively. And then comes the transportation, the distribution, and the logistics, all that in the front end part of the entire operations business. So when you get into all these aspects of the operations, you will find, depending again upon the business, you will find various kinds of decisions that you will have to take. Say, let's take forecasting. It's a very tricky area. In any business that you get into, be it a new business or be it an existing business where you have some past data, you will have to use all that, and you will also have to predict. Okay, there could be salespeople telling you, there could be some seasonal factors which you know will come, all that, and you will have to predict. So this forecasting is a very tricky area, and various techniques are used. You can use an average, you can use a moving average, you can use an exponential smoothing, which is kind of that the recent occurrences are more important than the older occurrences. So you give more weightage to the recent past data. There is also one factor which I've seen in most of the organizations, that every person, okay, has a tendency. Some do this forecasting, this prediction with a high numbers. Some are conservative; they want to keep it low. So you know when this guy is forecasting, okay, I know that he may not meet the numbers. Or when that guy is forecasting, you may have to keep a little more because it may exceed what he has said. So all that you have to keep in mind while you get into forecast. Similarly, when you get into the other stages of operations, it could be sourcing, where would you make or would you buy? Would it be in-house or would it be outsourced? Similarly, when you get into price, would it just be the price or would it be the landed cost? Would it be the terms, which means somebody who is giving you a good credit, will that be taken into calculation of what his offer are? So all those are extremely important when you get into sourcing. There is also another factor, which is a soft factor. And I'm addressing, I know people who are entrepreneurs, and therefore they are relatively newer businesses and smaller businesses to that extent, as unlike large corporations. There's also a legacy of the vendors that you have, because when you start, there are certain people who come and help you. Okay. As you grow, would you like to continue with them, or would you like to upgrade? Would you like to change? Some of the vendors are a strength to you, and some of them may become a handicap to you. How do you handle these softer issues? Then you get into inventory. When you get into inventory, again, there are various systems, but would you do continuous monitoring? Would you do a periodic monitoring? Okay. Depending again upon the systems that you have and the economies of scale, because you can't go ahead and implement an SAP or even another, say, Tally or whatever, depending upon which stage of the business you are. So you will have to weigh and decide at what stage would you invest in systems to improve your inventory levels. And finally after all this comes the operation, where, as I said, it's all to do with an efficiency and an effectiveness. Could be a trade-off between the two. It depends on the investment that you make. How much automation would you put in? It depends on the return or investment that you are looking at. And finally, the quality. Okay, whatever you put, that will finally result in kind of a quality. You can't put the moon if you don't have the collections to match that. So, and in all these operations, something that runs across is the information system, the qualities, the safety and environment, the regulation and compliance. So I'm talking about a plethora of things in operations management. What I would like to now bring it down to something that you would like to take back after this session is that, irrespective of the kind of operations that you are involved in, okay, just remember that there are two factors in most of the operations. One is the cost factor. The cost factor is very simple because it's a tangible thing. It's cost factor in the inventory, in the transportation, in the factories, the facilities, the IT. You will have to keep them at an optimum level and yet be able to service your customer and keep him satisfied. But there is a service factor, which is not so easily given the priority because it's not so tangible, but they are probably much more important. So let me repeat: there's a cost factor, very easy to identify, but there's a service factor which you have to constantly revisit and see where are you on that. Is there any improvement that is possible or not without increasing costs? These service factors, just to elaborate, maybe the response time to customer, the product variety, if you are in a, say, food business, okay, or the product availability, or the customer experience, or the time that you take to market, or the order visibility that the customer has. Like you would see that nowadays, whichever big platform that you choose, be it Amazon, Flipkart, you have so much of visibility, or even a logistic. It gives so much of comfort to the customer. Okay, but it comes at a cost. So these service factors are equally important in operations, and you should not lose sight of them just for cost factors. Okay, so just remember these two things. You need to be efficient, but you need to be effective. And therefore, while you can definitely concentrate on cost factors, don't lose sight of the service factors. And going beyond this, I would just like to tell you, in case you want to read more about various stages that small businesses go through during their growth. Okay, there's a great article in HBR, quite an old article, early 80s. I'll ask my friend to put it up. It's called The 5 Stages of Small Business Growth. Okay, and while it was written then, researched and written then, it still applies, and it will continue to apply. Okay, and all that it says is, when you get into a business, the first stage is existence, which is that you have a business, you need to have enough customers, you need to be able to deliver your products, you need to provide a service, you need to expand from one customer to more, you have to have money to be able to do that business. So the first thing that comes is existence. Once you have established the business, comes the next stage, which is survival. Survival is a continuity of that existence stage, which means, do you have enough cash to break even? Do you have cash to invest, to put in some capital asset, or repair or replace? Okay, are you generating enough cash flow to stay in the business, to finance the growth that you envisage? That's the next stage. Once you've crossed this stage, and to an entrepreneur, let me tell you, you're getting into a very, very important part of the stage, which is the success. Okay, you've crossed these two stages, you reach a stage which is the success stage. This is the time when you need to disengage from being a doer to a person who leads. Okay, so you need to disengage, and you need to then move on to a growth stage. Okay, from this growth stage, you finally reach a stage which this article talks about takeoff, but basically this is when you actually start growing rapidly, and you need to put in all the various paraphernalia that is involved in a larger corporation. And finally, and in this stage, you have, therefore, your job will be your stress would be on delegation, on arranging the cash, and the funding, and all that gets important. And finally is where you start cruising, which is, here it is called as resource maturity. So all these are extremely important, and you have to know where you are in your business. What are the factors that are important in such things? And again, it depends on which stage of the business you are. Initially, it's the financial resources which is the most important aspect. As you start growing, you get into the personal resources. the kind of people, the numbers, their depth, the quality, okay, the management, the staff, all that. Beyond that stage, you get into the systems part of it, which is, do you have the sophistication of both information, planning, control? Okay. And finally comes the business resources. Let me again repeat. There's the financial resources, then moves on to personal resources, then moves on to systems resources, and finally business resources. What are these business resources? Which I said you have to keep the customer happy too, which is customer relations, your market share, your supplier relations, your manufacturing and distribution process, the technology, and finally your reputation. Okay, these are management factors. But as an entrepreneur who set up this business, there are four more factors which are important during this movement. Initially, okay, it is your goals, which is for yourself or for the business that you have. Then comes the operational abilities that you have, which could be in marketing, which could be in manufacturing, which could be in servicing, which could be in various aspects of the business. Then comes your, once the operational abilities are utilized in the business, comes your managerial ability. Managerial ability is to your willingness to delegate, okay, and your capability to manage others. And finally, it is the strategic abilities. You might like to lead, you might like to even let go. Okay, you might like to concentrate and grow some other business of your organization. Let this cruise and keep running. So it all depends. In operations. You have to know where you are and how would you like to deal depending upon the stage of the business that you are in. Besides, again, I repeat, you have to be efficient and you have to be effective, or you have to be responsive. Okay, you should look at cost factors, but don't ignore the service factors. And with that, I think let me give it back to Oman for
Thank you.
to get back to.
Thank you so much. And in fact, Subir, he spoke the wide spectrum of operations. Also he entered with a thing like, mentally he has taken us from a small startup to a large corporation. Talking about various aspects in operations, be it in manufacturing and as well as in service. One question to you, sir: is there any difference in operation? This question is to Mr. Subir. Is there any difference in the operations between manufacturing and service sector, or all same? How do you look? Because the operation you talked about, right from order processing to delivering to customers, that's the entire spectrum you are talking. Is there any difference in service industry or manufacturing?
Let me first try and define or distinguish between what is manufacturing and what is service industry. Okay, before I get into what is operations in these two. In my opinion, okay, let's say, what is manufacturing? Manufacturing is producing certain goods which you actually store and at a subsequent point deliver it to the customers. But in a service industry, the operation is, it facilitates simultaneous production and consumption of services. An example would be a restaurant. Okay, that's also manufacturing. There's materials, there are machines which converts this. There are people, labor, all these put together. They convert it into a product. The product gets consumed at the same restaurant, and therefore hospitality, it falls under the service industry of hospitality. Whereas or similarly, let's take even IT. You talk about, some companies have products and some company does service. Products are those which are made and then subsequently the customers buy it, and service is something where the company either at the customer site, or the customer comes to the company site and consumes that service. Okay. Operations to me is just a functional area, just like sales, marketing, HR, finance. It's a functional area. What is its job? Its job is planning, organizing, overseeing all that activities. Finally, objective is to provide quality of products or services with keeping the costs at I won't say low, but optimum, and also improve profitability. So in my opinion, there is not too much of difference between manufacturing and services. While manufacturing is more to do with some tangible products, okay, because there's a process, there's a discrete manufacturing, whichever way you do the manufacture, and there's a product that comes out, then you store it, and it's tangible. So you do a whole host of the same procurement, warehousing, allocating the resources, scheduling some production, maintaining some inventory, warehousing, all that. Whereas in service industry, it's a little intangible. Okay. Finally, your aim is to deliver an experience that leads to customer satisfaction. But in a service industry, the operation guy is very much involved in this delivery aspect. In manufacturing industry, he's a little away from this. Okay, so in my opinion, there's not too much of a difference. All that you have to do is to ensure that the processes, okay, that the strategy that you have, even in strategy, there are so many things to talk about. There's a company, the company has a competitive strategy. From there you draw the functional strategies. So you will have a manufacturing strategy, you will have a supply chain strategy, you will have a people strategy. So various strategies that you derive. So you'll have a strategy, you will have a plan, you'll have a process for doing this plan, and then you get into the execution of that. And execution in terms of conversion, transformation, is all that is operations.
Thank you, Mr. Subir.
There's a question from Suresh, which I'd like to address.
Yeah, okay.
Suresh BG. Suresh BG says that we are a Meditech startup. Okay. We are planning to raise capital from friends circle. He's ready to invest up to rupees 15 lakhs. Whether we have to give equity or preferential shares. Please share your thoughts. Okay. Now, if there is an emotional connect, I can't give you an answer, Suresh. Okay. But if there's an emotional connect and you want to give ownership because he's one of your co-promoters, co-founders, then there is no decision. But if you're looking at it as you're in need of funds and there is an investor, if you're looking at it from that point of view, okay, the real difference between equity and preferential shares is that preferential shares, you agree to a certain payout every year for a certain number of years. And at the end of it, you return back a lump sum, okay, which could be the amount or higher than the amount which you borrowed. Now, why do you want to do that? Okay, why can't it be debt? Why can't it be debt? Why can't you take a long-term debt at 15 lakhs and pay him the market rate of interest? Okay, maybe higher, maybe slightly higher. That's something you can arrive at. But then it's clear. Have I answered your question, Suresh? Do you still have a doubt? You can unmute yourself and ask.
Yeah, he's a NRI. So in debt, what we thought is that every year we have to comply with RBI. So that amount will be a bit higher.
Okay.
For 15 lakhs.
Okay.
So these are not company secretary.
Okay, you mean you have to pay him in foreign exchange?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, if there is such a complication, then maybe you can look at, but I would still say
okay,
a debt option is always better than an equity option at this stage. depends on what the value of your company is. Your company must be valued very small at the moment.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I
Very
would still say that a debt option is preferable for you. You'll have to find some way of some legitimate way, let me add, of getting the interest across to your friend. And I'm sure your auditor or your banker can help you in that.
Okay, sir. Thank you. We'll think in that direction.
But my advice would be to go for debt rather than equity or preferential shares.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Welcome.
So the floor is open. We will wait for participants to raise
There's
questions.
a question, Abraham, from Mathura Mohan.
Mathura
Can you see that?
Mohan is my new LinkedIn friend.
It says, can we take it as value addition through human element with or without product is service industry, and value addition through product is product industry? Okay.
Okay, I think he has sent the question to you in private.
Yeah.
Private.
Okay. Is it private? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, you can address that.
Yeah. I think that we should not actually get into the distinction so much. Okay. In my opinion, because there can be, you get into the net and you will find various theories of what is a service industry versus what is a manufacturing industry, what is a product and what is a service. So human element is something which is always there. It always is in most of the industries, is a very vital part in value addition. Okay. Product again is there both in manufacturing and in service. As I said, in restaurant there's a product, okay, and in say shampoo there is a product. Okay, so product is there, but the point is in most of the cases the product is probably made when the service is demanded in a service industry, whereas the product is made in advance of anticipation of the order in a manufacturing industry. That would be, in my opinion, a better way to distinguish the two, if I have answered the question.
In terms of value addition, if I may add, in a product you can value add if you have an intellectual property, so a patent or something like that. You can value add, or you have an advantage, okay, value add, if you have an exclusive source of supply, okay, or brand. Okay. If you have a brand that is valuable, the brand is also a source of value addition. But in a service, now these things can all be replicated in one way or the other as far as product is concerned. But service is often difficult to replicate. It's not so easy. Okay, because that runs on people, that runs on systems, that runs on rigorous training, that runs on mindset. It's a whole complex of things that operates service delivery. Suvir, do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. And I would also again add, a lot of product industries are encompassing service to make it holistic as a satisfaction to customers. So many service industries look at expanding into product to grow their businesses. So again, they are quite a part of.
In fact, there is a Tamil song here, Kasu, Duddu, Money, Money. And I think both speakers are talking about that. In fact, Nandu started with profit is a concept, but cash in hand or bank is a reality. So
I can add to that.
Yeah.
Profit is a photograph, cash is a video film.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I want to ask you one question, sir. This is to Nandu. Finance is all about discipline, and you also talked about being cautious about 60, and all that. So I'll come to it a little later. And but when we say discipline, it means there are a set norms to follow, and it could be statutory compliance, collection cycles, payment credit periods, and so on. And based on your experience, can you share how managing these things tightly can create value to organization, or any experience non-managing it, how it impacts the company badly?
I know. I know a small company, okay, which delivered very high quality products. They were into industrial products, custom made for different customers, but industrial products, high value products, and each inquiry had to be costed separately. So there was a standard procedure. They do some costing, materials. They put all the cost together, and they'd quote. They'd get it. Incoming raw material, okay, delays, especially if some are imported, can push up the cost. Okay, you wait. While you're waiting for time, that pushes up your product cost. Okay, then you deliver. I'm making it simple. Okay, and you had costed for a 60-day credit, 60-day collection. The collection goes 90, 120 days. That's another cost. And at the end, you will realize that instead of making a 25% margin, that project delivered an 8% margin, which doesn't even cover overheads. So there are certain assumptions which were built into the costing. If those assumptions are not made disciplines and followed, okay, it is a sure way to draw the company down into it. What did they do? They had to dress up their figures because they had commitments to the bank. Now, when you dress up your figures, it was normally called income smoothing. There's a certain cost to that. Most businessmen know it. Okay, that pushes up your cost. That provides a rosy picture, while at the bottom, an earthquake is getting ready. Okay, and then the whole thing will explode. Now they need cash. Okay, they don't have enough collateral to provide to the bank. So what do? They go to other sources of local funding, and they borrow money at far higher rates than normal. Okay, that pushes their cost up further. And the company was on the edge of bankruptcy. Okay, looking at all these things and putting corrections, strong measures in place during the pandemic. Okay, cutting costs, reducing manpower. Okay, which there were a lot of dead wood inside. The company is slowly making a comeback, but it was on the edge of bankruptcy. To me, that was a frightening experience. And for all that, it's not a startup. The company which has been in existence over 30, 40 years. Here we are. I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah. So what I understand also that, say for example, when we start the company, in fact, being an entrepreneur myself, also, initially you try, tend to be little lenient on everything, because we look at first to build the business. What you are saying is right from the beginning. I mean, what I understand from you is right from the beginning have that rigor of certain disciplines on systems and processes, and ensure that whatever you're trying to drive, focus on that, and think. If you leave it initially, then
I'll go back to the first statement, Abraham. Okay, you have to buy something and sell it at a higher price than you buy. Okay, you have to collect before you have to pay. These principles, there are some principles which are non-negotiable. Your leniency can be on the negotiable principles.
okay.
Okay. But there are non-negotiable principles. For example, you cannot sell anything at a loss, because sell as much as you may. You will not, your business is only going to get doomed. The more you sell, the more doomed you are.
I think Mr. Subir is not there, so I think you're.
Okay. I don't know, you can.
You will come back.
Yeah.
Okay. So one more question, like in large corporations, you have a lot of scheduled meetings, reviews, and so on, and I can relate to various entrepreneurs. No, because they take most of the decisions during, they are involved in every process, and and hence they may not feel that they need to do a review for themselves, and because they know everything, they know. So, what is your suggestion in terms of having a formal review, even if you are a small organization? What is your suggestions?
There are two things. Sure. Running the business hands-on, you may know everything. Okay, running the business hands-on, you may know everything. But a business is a connected entity. Okay, so you have a buyer, you have a buying system, you have a conversion system, you have a transportation system, you have a selling system, you have a marketing system. Okay, you have a recruitment system, you have an R&D system. Business is a composite of many of these systems. Just because as an individual, you know what is happening in each, doesn't mean you don't have to review. Okay, it is always good periodically to look at where you are vis-a-vis where you are intending to be. Are you on track? Are you not on track? Two, I think it is good for everyone in the company to know how the company is doing. So if you do the review together, okay, everyone gets to know how the company is doing. Okay, which area, what needs to be stepped up. Okay, where the extra effort, where the extra support is required. Okay, and you can work together. And I also believe that review is an excellent opportunity for coaching. So if you want to combine all these things, therefore, understand where you are, understand where additional inputs are required, understand what is performing well, understand where additional inputs are required, and also use this as coaching and training for the entire organization together. It's best to have reviews. It's also, you'll develop your organization.
That's a great one. It's a good insight.
Thank you.
And there is
Sorry, Abraham. I'm finally back. Sorry.
Okay, good. Good to have you back.
Okay.
Okay, there's a question which has come up from Nima Joshi.
Okay. There is one question from Alexander also to Mr. Nandakumar.
Okay, I'll answer that. But okay then. Is Alexander's before Nima Joshi? Nima Joshi is.
So, Alexander, would you like to unmute yourself and ask the question directly?
Yeah, I'll just finish
Nima.
Nima Joshi's question. The chemical product manufacturer sells at rupees 10 per unit. I make it naturally, but it's 9 times higher. It's a bit challenging to motivate customers to shift since it's an essential item. Do we still go with normal retail margins? The chemical bar gives rupees 2 retail profit, and my soap will be rupees 18 also. A small business selling an FMCG product, what should be my own margin? Same industry norm. I cannot go with value pricing since we have to make a bigger ecological impact and higher customer adoption. Okay. I haven't understood the question clearly. Nima Joshi, can you please unmute yourself?
I've unmuted myself.
Ah,
Thank you
that's
for
nice.
taking the question.
Yeah, not at all. No, it's just my pleasure. And I'm glad you're asking this question. You know,
Sorry, I think I packed a lot in that one.
No, that's
sentence.
okay. The chemical product manufacturer sells at rupees 10 per unit to you,
No, and generally to the customer.
to the customer. Okay.
Yeah, it's priced at 10. Whereas the same product, when I make it and by the time I could get it to the store,
It's 90.
it comes at least at 90.
Okay.
So when I talk to the stores, they all go by retail margins. And for this particular product, the margin is about 20%.
Okay.
So when they sell this particular soap, I mean the item, the chemical one, they'll get a 2 rupee margin, whereas if they sell mine, they get an 18 rupee margin, which is a lot different. So does it still make sense that we go by margins when we negotiate with the retailers? And at the same time, what should be my own margin? Because it's the metrics is so skewed.
So here I want to ask you one question. Do you understand, are you solving a problem for any consumer? Okay, that's the first question
Yes.
I'll ask you. Okay.
Yes, I am.
Are there enough people who say that I would like to make an environment, I would like to buy an environment friendly, whatever, I'll call it a soap?
Yeah, it is a soap.
Okay,
Go ahead.
I'd like to buy an environment friendly soap.
Yeah.
Okay. What price would they be willing to pay for it? Would they be willing to pay 90 rupees for it?
That's
Have
the
you checked
funny
that out?
part.
Huh?
I have it's an e-base. So I have a customer. When she calls and she says, I want the soap, she makes a minimum order of 20 to 30.
Okay.
In one go.
Okay.
Because that is the need for her, the level of need for her. And whatever pricing, she's never even asked me what the price of the soap was before she went ahead and bought it, or even when she placed the order, because her need is much higher than anybody else. She's sensitive to chemical detergents, and for 25 years, she suffered because of chemical detergents. Now, there are other kinds of customers who are environmentally conscious, and they like to make the shift. Their challenge is maids. Maids are a problem. Maids will not, take up the soap. They want the chemical. They want the foam. They want the glitz and the glory that the chemical soaps give them. It makes it a lot easier for them. So there are a lot of challenges, but it's just that, again, you see how skewed it is, where I have one customer, at a time when they make a product decision, a buying decision, it has never been less than 4 or 5 bars at one go. Very rarely people have even asked for 2 because they want to try, but otherwise it's minimum 5 bars at a time they buy. So there is definitely a need, and there is a pull for it. There are challenges to overcome, but the customer, the buying customer, not the end user, the buying customer themselves are not really the problem. They are happy to want to go for something environmentally friendly and more skin friendly as well.
I would think that this is a niche which will take some time for it to grow.
In fact, this market actually is growing a lot because
it will grow.
Currently in the liquid space. In the liquid space, the number of players that have come in has substantially grown in the detergent liquid space. So I wanted to give something in the bar space because there are not many people who have focused on that area, but people are traditionally used to soap bars.
In the liquid space, it may be growing much faster because I think your consumers are directly using it. There may not be any maids because the liquid would be poured into washing machines.
So I make a dishwash I make a dishwash bar You're right. People have started to buy more dishwashers, but the actual challenge that I have with customers is not the machine, but rather the maids.
The
So
maids.
it's the maids that adoption is challenging. But see, that's the thing, right? It's even the other part of it is the pricing. Now, I really want to focus on the pricing here because that's my challenge. The first barrier is the price.
Okay. Now let me tell you what gross margin you must keep on a product like this.
Okay.
A product like this is new. You need significant investment
Okay.
in education, okay, which is advertising, not necessarily television, you know, because
Okay.
your target would be available even outside television.
Yes.
Okay. So anything less than 65% gross margin
Okay.
is not worth it.
Okay.
Okay. Because over time, others will come and catch up.
Yeah.
And then you can get competitive and other things. But at the moment, you need 60-65 because you're seeding the market.
Okay.
Hey, this is my back of palm calculation. No?
No, I value it.
Okay. Now, as far as retailer margin is concerned,
Yeah.
this is not mass distribution.
I would like to work with distribution channels. I don't want to do the direct selling to the customer. I don't want to go to the D2C route. I am looking at a different, kind of a marketing plan, distribution plan, that is.
Yeah. But, you know, there's a lot of education which the retailer will have to do to the customer.
Okay, so that puts the...
So he will demand a higher margin. But remember one thing. What is the inventory he'll keep? Okay. Your margin should constitute what is the inventory he'll keep.
Okay.
There's a certain fixed portion for his overheads.
Okay.
And there is an absolute margin which is profit. These will be the three components.
Okay.
And that should make it worth his while.
Okay. What is the ideal inventory that I should be able to get him the business?
Depends on how often you service him.
Okay.
Now, if you service him once a week, which will be very high for a new product,
okay,
it would be advisable for him to keep about 10 days stock, 10 days sales stock.
Okay.
But if you service him once a fortnight,
okay,
he'll have to keep 20 days.
Okay.
And if you service him once a month, he'll have to keep 40 days.
Okay.
So you'll have to calculate your percentage on inventory. I'm sure you know how to do it.
I've been actually working with custom-made products all this while.
Okay.
So I'm just entering retail.
So if the price to your retailer is ₹1.
Yeah.
Okay. 40 days. Okay. What is his cost of capital? You can assume it to be 8%.
Okay.
8% on ₹1 divided by 365 into 40.
Okay.
That's how you work the margin. Okay. And then you carry on and do his overhead, you know, which yours will be a very small contribution, but you provide 0.25% to his overhead and you say, okay, this guy's got to put in extra effort, so I'll give him 10%. Okay. And give the total 10, 12%, whatever, 15%. You work it and give it to him. But if I were you, I would do a lot of consumer contact at retail outlets. I'd hire people to do consumer contact, to explain your concept.
Got it.
To housewives. That becomes very important. And especially in outlets where consumers are regulars who come and buy, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, those sort of outlets.
Okay.
You're in Chennai, aren't you? Where do you live in Chennai, if I may?
No, I'm from Coimbatore.
You're from Coimbatore. So in Sai Baba Colony,
yeah,
for example, there are outlets where consumers come regularly.
Yes.
They come and buy, consumers come and buy their monthly shop.
Okay.
Such outlets, which are high traffic, you could, during 1st to 10th, do consumer contact, explain your concept, and promote it in a big way.
Okay. Got it.
These
So
are some of the
your
things you have to-
advice is about 60 to 65% for myself.
Okay.
And then but the metrics to the retailer changes, and that's something that I have to wrap my head around the calculation you just
Don't
gave
worry.
me.
You can
So-
always, you can mail us. You can mail me at
That is
nandu
lovely.
at mavensbmg.com.
Okay, I'll do that.
And if you have any doubts, I'd be happy to hear.
Thank you very much.
I hope
Thanks.
it was useful. Okay.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
There is one Alexander Kutnis.
Alexander Kutapa, please. Let's.
Yeah. Good evening.
Good evening.
This is regarding, you talked about profitability and cash, and we see big businesses like Amazon, Uber, they all go for a long time without profit, but still they are able to have the big brand value.
Okay.
Now, what makes them to gain that brand value when they continue to make a loss, when they don't
Very
make?
nice. Very interesting question. Very interesting question.
Right.
While I was talking to Nima, I asked her a question. Are you solving a customer problem? Okay. So companies like the companies which you mentioned, Amazon,
Right.
Uber,
Ola, yeah.
they are solving a customer problem.
Okay.
Okay. What are they doing? They are linking demand and supply.
Right.
Now people can shop from the comfort of their own homes. They don't have to go to a retail outlet.
Right.
They don't have to get confused. The paradox of choice, seeing millions of products. What they want, they type, they pick it up from Amazon, they get it at a good price. They know they're not being cheated. They can compare the prices. So there's and it is delivered home. So there's a very large merchandise, okay, which they can choose from. They get door delivery.
Right.
From the comfort
Right.
of their home without going out, especially during these pandemic times, it turned out to be very good. So they're solving a customer problem.
Right.
Now, the next aspect of it is that I come here and talk about unit margin. Okay. I said, if you sell something, you have to make some profit. Okay. You can't sell anything at a loss, because if you sell anything at a loss, how much ever you sell, you will only sink your business further. So all of them
Right.
are doing the trip. Uber is doing the trip at a profit.
Right.
Okay. Amazon is doing the delivery,
Right.
sale of something, the marketplace is doing it at a profit. Amazon is making a profit. Okay. But overall, they're at a loss. So if you scale it up, okay, they have huge scale and they have to cover their scale. So to scale it up,
Right.
they need to advertise, they need to promote, okay, they need to expand in various ways.
Right.
They are seeking the money, they are seeking funding to expand, because if they expand, they will not only break even, they will become very profitable, because they're solving a customer problem. There's a certain network and it's working.
Right.
Okay. Now, since they go with a brand which already has some equity, they're solving a problem, though they are making a loss.
Right.
When they scale, the investors see value in the company.
Right.
So if someone puts in 300 million, they see value in that company. It's a huge brand. Okay. And they see their investment multiplying 3x, 4x, 5x, 10x times. So it is based on the business model that these investments come.
Right.
And it is the business model that gives the brand its value, along with the service delivery of service. Mr. Kutapa, I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. I have understood. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Thank you. I think Dhanushya wants to ask a question. Dhanushya, you can unmute.
Dhanushya, please unmute and ask.
This is Dhanusha. I'm the co-founder of Neurostellar, a company incubated at IITM. So thank you so much for such an insightful session, sir. I would like to ask my question to Nandakumar, sir, where Actually, we are a completely bootstrapped and a pre-revenue stage company. We are developing the product right now. Just had a question around the salary that has to be taken to the founders. Should that be kept as a liability to the company, or would that bring any problem, or would that depreciate the valuation when we go for investments? Just wanted to get your
Fa-
insight.
Fair salaries are actually a correct depiction
Mhm.
of the costs of the company.
Got it, sir.
Fair salaries
Okay.
are a correct depiction of the costs of the company.
Okay.
Now, whether you wish to draw the salary or keep it as a liability,
Okay.
as payables, okay, on the company's books is your choice.
Got it, sir.
But fair salaries will reflect costs properly, and I think you must provide salaries.
Okay.
And if your cash situation is comfortable, you must draw salaries.
Got it, sir. Would that cause a, if it's been kept as a liability, would that cause a problem with the depreciation of the valuation?
If I were an investor,
Mhm.
I would wonder why the founders are not drawing their salaries.
Okay.
You know what I mean? You could draw your salary and reinvest it in the company.
Got it, sir.
Why do you want to keep it as a liability?
But right now we thought maybe we would have that as a liability, and once we start making revenue, we could start drawing the cash. Is what we.
So you draw it and invest it back,
Okay.
and there are more shares for you in the company. So this is a
Okay.
better way even for you and for the company.
Got it, sir. Got it, sir. Yeah.
Why show a higher liability?
Okay. Okay, sir. Cool. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. This was the
Welcome.
question.
I hope it's useful.
Yes,
You
sir.
can check with your auditor too, but
Yes.
this is my first response to your question.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
I think Subir.
Yeah.
You were also talking about forecasting. Since there is no questions from the participants, I thought I will ask you. Most of them are startup, or they may not have past data. So only thing what entrepreneurs bring in is a lot of optimism and hope. And so what is your suggestion while doing forecasting the production of business?
Yeah, as I had mentioned in my presentation, that that's the most difficult part of the entire operations. And as you said, startups don't have any past data to bank upon to be able to forecast. Okay, but if you really look at it, it's not just a startup problem. Let's take a large company. When they get into a new product, they also don't have any data. Okay, it's for them, it's a startup of a new product, may not be a startup of a new company. Okay, so it's kind of equivalent. You may not have any past data, but you still have to forecast, you still have to predict, and you still have to plan for certain demand that you anticipate. Now, the trick is that whatever you do, you must ensure that you procure very cautiously, okay, particularly unique materials, unique to that product, okay, so that should there be a change of course, you drop that product, or you don't want that packaging or whatever, you don't lose out in obsolescence. So anything that is unique to that product, you must be very careful. You can give, to get a good price from your supplier, you can actually tell the supplier your commitment that I would buy. But since he is also a part of the entire process, okay, he is also contributing to the success of your product. As long as he is convinced that you will not take away his business and go to some other supplier, he will also actually support you. But you cautiously arrange deliveries or printing at his end, say it's a packaging product, and move very cautiously. You do it for the quantity which will not finally result in a stock out. So depending upon the replenishment, okay, and as Nandu was saying, in a store you decide on inventory, how fast you can replenish. Similarly, in this, you decide on how fast can the supplier replenish the material. Only that much amount, the lead time amount, is what you get. Okay, but let the supplier be ready with his raw materials, so that should there be a scale up, should there be a big demand after you have launched the product, you should be able to meet it without much of problems. Okay, so
Alexander Kutapan has a question. If you're done, Subir, if you're done.
yeah, so you have to apply your judgment in that forecast, but you must always keep your plan B handy, in the sense, unless you actually plan for this, okay, you will never be able to meet the requirement, meet the demand.
Okay.
Have I answered?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So,
in continuation to Dhanushya's question, Mr. Alexander Kutapan has a question. Please, you can go ahead and ask the question.
at least
Right. Yeah, if I can understand Dhanushya's question, or this is also my question. Let's say I have 6 months time to develop a product, and today bootstrapped, we don't have fund. Now, though as an entrepreneur founder, I want to draw salary, there is nothing to pay. Now you said you take the salary and invest it back. But the problem is we don't have anything as a cash. Now in that situation, how to put this as a liability, or so in that case, you let me know how to handle.
It's a difficult one. I think you need an auditor's help over there more than mine. But I think you can check with your auditor whether instead of showing your salary as a liability, instead of showing your drawing as a liability, because that is a cost, you're working on it. Okay.
Right.
Whether you can transfer that as equity, sweat equity at the end of 6 months or something when cash starts coming. So that's something your auditor can advise you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I think only 5 more minutes left. Anybody wants to ask question?
Last question, or we wrap up? Okay.
Okay. So what I understand from both of you, like Nandakumar in fact talked about the finance goals of any business is, increase revenue, improve cash flow, increase profitability. And you also shared about the importance of pricing strategy, and also talked about the most important one. In fact, the key learning for me personally is that while doing costing, look at win-win, look at your intermediaries, ensure they also have their good ROI, and because they are the partners in progress, and you need to take care of them. That's a good learning for me personally. And in fact, Subir was talking about whether it is product or service, the goal of operation is to maximize value to customers. In fact, he started the sentence itself with to maximize profit, reduce cost. So the entire focus is on customer. He talked about the more rigor in every process need to be there to ensure only the value-adding process are taken, and optimum use of resources. He also talked about the 4 resources: finance, people, system, and business processes, and no wastage or nil wastage. And on-time delivery, he talked about an on-time delivery every time. And you also talked about the transparency in the process gives more confidence to customers. You talked about efficiency and all that. Broadly, I got the finance looks at how to create value for the organization, and operation looks at how to deliver value to customers. So before closing, would you like to share final words to the
1 minute? There's one question which has come up.
Oh, okay.
In the meanwhile,
Okay.
It is from Dr. Chitra. Dr. Chitra Anand.
Hi.
Hi. Dr. Chitra, how soon must you raise funds to keep cash flow intact. Okay. Now,
Yes, you were just talking about cash flow and keeping it intact and stuff like that. So one of
Yes.
the questions I have is, okay, we do have a cash flow projection and model, and then the whole fundraise round typically takes 3 to 4 months. So when you're doing a series of races, sometimes I've heard people say that one person has to be constantly focused on the race side, and the other person must be focused on the operations side. So I just wanted more clarity from you as to, let's say we in 6 months from now, our runway is 6 months. How ahead should we start raising?
the cash coming in even a month ahead of requirement is better than the cash coming in 1 month later. Hello?
Yes.
Okay,
I
cash coming in 1 month ahead is always better than cash coming in 1 month later. Okay, so if it takes you 6 months, okay, start 7 months prior.
got it.
Okay, if it takes you 6 months to raise cash, start 7 months prior. It's always better.
Got it. Thank you.
I think we will wind up.
But please be frugal with the cash you get. Okay, the wisest and most successful entrepreneurs are the ones who are frugal.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, if I were in his shoes, in Nandu's shoes, I would say just in time. Okay, I would not even, because that's kind of operations focus generally. So like any inventory, just get it just in time. But yes, you must always have something up your sleeve for any of the eventualities.
You don't pay 1 month's salary, you're in trouble. Okay, so it's always 1 month ahead is always better than 1 month later. This is my rule of thumb, and so if
Great.
it takes you 6
Thank you.
months, start 7 months. Here you are. Good. Thank you. I think
Yeah.
we've hit the time.
So thank you, Mr. Nandu and Subir for
Thanks.
sharing your experiences and insight. And thanks to all the participants who stayed till the last. And thanks to Tai for this opportunity. Until we meet again, bye to all of you.
Thank you, participants, and thank you, Tai.